Hello, this is the Captain Paxo with a guide for the P90 in Battlefield 4. This weapon is designed for close quarters. Anyone who's used this gun for even a second could tell you that. But I would not recommend this laser sight, and here's why. When you add the laser sight, it decreases your spread with hipfire to the point where in extreme close quarter situations, you have to be really accurate in order to hit your target, which in these situations can be detrimental. Yes, your hipfire gets more effective range with the laser sight, but at that range you can simply aim down sights. That's why you have the aim down sights in the first place. What I like to do is I start off with hip firing, and then once I've lined up my shot, I get the target in the center of my hip fire, I then aim down sights because the hip fire is a little less accurate than the aim down sights, and I've lined up my aim down sights. It's kind of along the same veins as pre-firing. I'd also not recommend the compensator nor the muzzle brake, as that it doesn't have any noticeable effect on the recoil itself because the recoil of the P90 is so low. And when you get to the point where something isn't really giving you a positive effect, it's only going to give you a negative effect. And the compensator and the muzzle brake decrease your accuracy. And with the magazine size and the fire rate of the P90, it only serves to disadvantage you, if that's the right way of saying that. Because you want to be firing this gun in full auto, because it's a PDW, has a high rate of fire, I'd recommend the heavy barrel just to make it a heck of a lot more accurate, meaning that you can do this full auto even if your target's like say 30 meters out, and the first shot recoil increase isn't really that bad since the P90 doesn't really have that much recoil in the first place, and since after the first shot it doesn't have much recoil at all. The first shot, yeah, okay, it might throw your aim off a little bit, but after that first shot you can pull your aim back on target, completely negating the heavy barrel in the first place. Like I said, you can take out targets with this at about 30 meters, maybe even a little bit more, but I wouldn't recommend it because the P90 is, of course, a PDW. It prefers close quarter engagements. When it comes down to sight preference, it's whatever you want. Right now I'm running with the PKA, which is a times 3.4. You could run with a times 4 if you wanted. You could put on some canted iron sights if you don't want to use a laser sight like I don't. But I'm actually getting quite used to the times 3.4 because any enemy that's within medium range, I can start off with a hip fire, and then once I've lined up my shot I can go into the ADS, because that's the main disadvantage of these high magnification, is that it can be hard to line up your shots. But if you start off with a hip fire, it's a lot easier to line up your shots, and then you can follow through with the ADS. And then for longer range targets, it's of course a lot more accurate because it zooms in a lot more than the times 1 or the reflex sights. This weapon, of course, has a very large magazine size, which is followed by a relatively long reload speed. I think it's 2.5 seconds when you still have bullets left in the chamber, or the magazine, and it's a 3.5 second reload when you're completely empty. So you want to time your reloads well, but because you have that magazine, like the big magazine size, you don't have to reload after every kill. You don't even have to reload after every 2 kills, or even 3 if you're careful, because you can get 5 kills with this weapon if you land all your shots. I think it's a 5 bullet kill. I think it does 21 damage. So yeah, 5 bullet kill. So feasibly, if you're perfect with your shots, you don't overshoot, hold the trigger down for an extra length of time or whatever, you can get 10 kills with this. But of course that's not going to happen, is it? It's Battlefield. But my point is, you don't have to reload after every kill, and you should exercise that when using this weapon. You need to hold off on reloading. You need good reload discipline in order to use this weapon. You kind of learn that quite quickly because it has a long reload time relative to its weapon class, which of course it has the big magazine size to compensate for that. But nonetheless, if you reload at a bad time, you're gonna feel it quite badly. So reload discipline, it's quite useful to have. But as for the kind of playstyle that you, or I would recommend running with this weapon, because it's got like such great hip fire, you can run and gun, kind of sprint around corners using hip fire to your advantage, because when you're hip firing you can obviously move faster and you can actually aim faster as well. So in those situations where you're so close to your opponent and you don't know where they are, they're kind of moving all over the screen, you can't really get a clear shot on them, because you're not aiming down sights, you can obviously move a lot faster and hopefully land those shots, because your hip fire is more than likely going to be more accurate than your opponent's hip fire, because more often than not they're not going to be using another PDW with amazing hip fire like the P90. And because it has that large magazine size, it means you can kind of go on these somewhat long kill streaks, these uninterrupted sprees where you take out a handful of enemies without having to reload. But of course when you do have to reload, it's not great, because 3.5 second reload speed when it's empty. So you gotta be mindful of your reload speed, but you've also got to be mindful of your large magazine size. So utilizing your large magazine size to take out large groups of enemies and not impulse reloading at a bad time. But you've also got to be wary that when you do have to reload, it's going to be quite a long reload, which is why I say reload when you need to. No, wrong way around. Reload when you have time, not when you need to. If you have time to go through the 2.5 second reload speed, it's going to benefit you more than if you're in a bad situation and you end up having to go through that 3.5 second reload speed. It's an extra second reload speed, and it's a relatively long reload speed even amongst assault rifles. So your opponent, even if they're reloading, they're probably going to beat you to that reload and win the gunfight a second before you can really fight back. So overall, what are the advantages of this weapon? Well, relative for a PDW, it has a high rate of fire and a large magazine size, and of course it being a PDW, it has good hip fire and good recoil control. However, its disadvantages are of course that long reload animation, well, relatively long reload animation, and sometimes, well, the hip fire can be a little bit too accurate. Sometimes you just need that spread to be a little bit wider just to get you out of some sticky situations, but oh well. Its range is an inherent disadvantage because of course it's a PDW. All PDWs have a range disadvantage. That's what makes them different from carbines. Carbines obviously have more range, and it has not that great accuracy because of at said range. The further out you go, the less accurate it's going to be. And something that's kind of unique to the PDW or the P90 and some other PDWs is that you can't customize the grip. So you're missing one more attachment slot to customize your gun with. But that has been pretty much the end of my weapon guide. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.